Hello and welcome, North Neighborhood residents, to the mapping feedback exercise for the zoning code rewrite effort. At this point in the game, we have started to wrap up the elements of the actual zoning code document itself. We've met with City Council several times to discuss the components of the new code, and we now all feel that we're in the position to take feedback on the actual mapping of our new form zone overlays across the city of Golden. And obviously, this requires your feedback. This video provides you with the methodology that was used to apply our form zone overlays, and it's intended to be viewed prior to filling out a brief questionnaire that's embedded in this project's Guiding Golden page. If you clicked on this video, it's because you have R1 or R1A zoning. But I'm actually going to use the R2 zone district as a primer for how these form zones have been applied. I think it helps to understand the system better through a form zone district that has multiple form zone areas contained within its boundary. The R1 and R1A zone districts are a little different when it comes to our new form-based code, and they actually only have one form zone. So to jump right in, I want to go over the basic concept of the form-based code and how it has been applied across the community. The image of the map on the left is a representation of the R2 zone district today. It's a snippet from our zone district map. And it's provided to highlight that the R2 zone district is a multifamily zone district that permits, for the most part, residential uses up to a certain maximum number of units per development. But the representation here with this uniform standard call out is helpful and informative because when it comes to the actual scale of a multifamily development and how it can be built across the R2 neighborhood, the current code offers a one-size-fits-all list of regulations that affect things like setbacks, building height, lot coverages, and other things. Uniform standards because all properties across the neighborhood have the same set of rules regardless of where your property is located and regardless of what types of development exist on the block surrounding your property. And that's, again, why we've labeled this image uniform standards, because those uniform standards, if you become aware over the past couple of years, have caused some issues across the community. The reason being because the R2 development regulations, again, how big you can build a building on the lot, allow for much bigger structures than those that are most common to the R2 neighborhood and similar other neighborhoods. The new code, represented by the map on the right, works to fix this issue and recognizes that there are different development patterns within the R2 zone district that have occurred over time, and it introduces new development standards that are unique to each of these form zone areas that you see identified on the map to the right. It's important to note, though, that these unique development standards are modeled after developments that have come before in the neighborhood. Again, the representation of the current code on the right allows for the construction of large structures when the neighborhood has a lot of small structures. The image on the right, which represents our new form zones, draws different circles around different areas of the neighborhood based on the scale of the development that's on the ground today. So if you look at the map on the right side of the slide, you'll see these different areas called form zones. They're contained within the greater R2 boundary and are overlaid across the properties in the R2 zone district, again, to specifically control building scale. All R2 properties within the red dashed line are still permitted the same uses that exist in the current zoning code. Again, it's important to note that this effort, the zoning code rewrite, was not about changing the underlying use on the property, just the scale of development. But depending on where your property is located, you may be permitted different scales of development regulations. So, for instance, jumped ahead a little there. If you're located in the core, you're permitted multifamily uses, but to build those out, they have to be small scale. If you're located in transition, you're permitted the same small-scale development pattern regulations permitted in core, but also some medium development regulation types. And finally, if you're in edge, you're permitted all three. Small-scale development provisions, medium-scale development provisions. So that was an example of R2. What's in store for R1 and R1A? As I previously mentioned, there's just one form type that has been applied to the R1 and R1A zone districts, and that form zone is titled peripheral. This slide shows two different maps with two different colors in the same boundary, but it's to highlight the point I made previously. Uses remain the same in our standard zone district boundaries as they are existing in the current code today. Had more than one form zone been applied to R1, the image on the right you would see would contain several different colors. But since only one form zone has been applied to the R1 and R1A districts, you just see this yellow peripheral boundary. So why only one form zone? The answer is because the R1 and R1A zone districts only permit single-family development. In the R2 zone district, where multifamily development is permitted, the different form zones that I mentioned, core, transition, and edge, as a repeat, permit varying degrees of small-scale, medium-scale, and large-scale multifamily developments. Some areas of the R2 only have single-family blocks. Some areas have duplexes and others have fourplexes, and that's why we need to draw different circles around those neighborhoods so that those forms can be preserved. But with R1 and R1A, it's just single family. Now, that's not to say that the consultants didn't take a look at the single family developments across the neighborhood. Moving forward, there will be a small collection of single family form types permitted in the zone district that permit single family development that's of a scale consistent across the R1 and R1A neighborhoods. So what are form types? Well, this is a look at that. Form types are our new approach to development standards that consist of these pre-canned development templates, like the two that you see here on this slide. These are two of the three form types permitted in the peripheral form district, while the third is a clone of the form type that is available on the right of this slide. And essentially, this village house has a sister form type called the side drive house, which is basically the restrictions and regulations permitted in village house, but just with an access coming from the street. And that's available for people who don't already have alley access. The lot regulations for all of the single family form types, though, permitted in R1 and R1A are very similar to the setback, building height, lot coverage requirements that exist in the current code. But there are some additional requirements. The biggest requirement is that we are now placing a cap on how large a single family house can grow. The largest single family form type only permits development up to 3,200 square feet above ground. So if you had a finished basement, you would be able to add that finished square footage on top of that 3,200 square cap. Garages and attics, other unfinished spaces would not also count towards that 3,200 square foot cap. And again, this determination was made by the consultants after collecting data across the single-family neighborhoods. Only in rare instances would a house grow above 3,200 square feet. So to maintain that sort of consistent development pattern across our R1 and R1A neighborhoods, this cap was put in place. The current code allows for a house to grow as big as someone would want it to grow, so long as they could secure enough land. So you could imagine McMansions popping up in these neighborhoods. The new code prevents that from happening. So with that, I'd like to say farewell. Thank you for watching this video. We'll hope you take the time to answer our questionnaire. And thank you very much for participating in this fall's outreach.